It is a day in which, I mean, fortunately by going in the fall, you won't have the hot temperatures. We do kind of encourage children not to drink lots of liquids because there aren't bathrooms in any of these places. It is the morning that you may not want to go to Starbucks and get your venti coffee before you leave the trip. But if you find you have a student who really desperately needs to use a restroom, when we leave here, we'll be heading out and going on over to Route 9. We pass right near Fisk. You're also near Schofield. When we get to Devil's Slide, it's in the Upham district. When we go to Kelly Park, we're near Bates. If at any point along the way you need to pull into a school, just tell the school secretary, yes, you're on the geology field investigation and the children need to use the bathroom. So that's one way that you can get around that. In terms of the teacher and what the teacher will be doing, a lot depends on the nature of the group. If there's a student in the group that has an allergy that needs an EpiPen, the teacher will likely tag along with that group. Wellesley public school employees are not allowed to drive children in their cars, so the teacher will follow around in her own car, but she would follow with that group. If a child has an EpiPen and their parents on the trip, well then they'll just be in that group and there's not an issue. So a teacher might be kind of tasked to go along with a particular, follow along a student, and that will happen. If you're in a school that has a full-time TA for children in the classroom, that TA may be riding in the car with you if that child's with you. So they'll be in the front seat because we wouldn't want children in the front seat anyway. Otherwise, the teacher may just kind of go to spot just to try to catch groups there and take pictures. They may choose to be at one particular spot and get all the groups when they come there. So that really can vary. For a lot of this, individual teachers, we like to give teachers some degree of autonomy. So they may structure things slightly differently. Just check with your classroom teacher about any kind of structures or how they want to handle things. Sound good? All right, so we're going to head off this way. Exactly. And in fact, you'll notice on, again, your little script that you've got, walk onto the bridge, have students discuss. How has the river below changed the landscape over time? And then it goes on to say, if students are stuck, point out the high ground you came from, and on the other side of the bridge, how is the water so much lower than the surrounding land? So to your point exactly, and clearly this is a river that has cut out this gorge, because we're now in the area called Hemlock Gorge.
So it eroded the dirt.
So you'll notice along the way, I've been asking you questions. I pointed out the fact that whatever you notice is what you notice. I mean, there's no right or wrong answers because you're seeing what you're seeing. You may have also noticed along the way that I've done things like, can you say more about that? Or what makes you say that? Those are the kinds of things I encourage you to use. Those are the kinds of things I encourage you to use with children. You don't need to be teaching them about the geology. But what you do need to be doing is trying to elicit their thinking. If a student at a site says, I think this is evidence of weathering, and you say, okay, what makes you say that? And they give you a reason, as flawed as that reason may sound to you, if they're giving you a claim and backing it up with their evidence, accept it. Because really, this is not about right and wrong answers. This is about students learning to reason things through for themselves, give evidence for their thinking. Yes, we would like to eventually develop the correct ideas, but you don't have to be correcting their geology. You really just want them thinking. And the big things I really want to come out of this trip is for students to, A, recognize that you don't have to get into a school bus to see some really cool things, because we've got some really cool geologic sites right here within our town line. B, get them outside. Get them out of the classroom and into, out of the laboratory and into the field where they're doing things for real. Those are my two biggest goals. And then we just want kids talking about their reasoning and thinking things through. All right. We are about to head downhill because we will be ending up down there. So it's great on the way down. The way back up, maybe not so much. Again, because it's so wet, it's going to be a little slippery with the leaves, so definitely be careful. Here again is a place to remind students to stay on the paths because there is poison ivy on the sides of off the path, right on the sides. So definitely remind them to stay on the path.
What happens if they touch poison ivy?
There's not much we can do about that. You know, some children aren't allergic, but the truth of the matter is, as long as if they can wash off with soap and water within, it's not going to flare up immediately. They just need to, at the earliest opportunity, wash really well with soap and water, and they should be okay. I mean, I know that there are some children that just look at poison ivy and they seem to flare up. So, I guess this is where you get to be like, don't get off the paths, it's poison ivy. And if you scare them enough, don't scare them. No, do not scare them. I did not say that. But again, even with the poison ivy, it's about managing the environment. In some of these places, there may be bugs and mosquitoes. It's like we have to manage the environment. And so don't be afraid to go outside for fear of poison ivy. Just be careful. All right, we're going to head this way. Over to the other, across the bridge, please. Yes, over to there with that stone marker.
That's the same with the high
point. Just a quick little side note from the Wellesley information I have. This bridge is called Echo Bridge, and it is the second largest single arch stone bridge in North America, according to the notes I have, which begs the question, which is the first largest, and I have no idea. And this was part of that aqueduct that was built to bring water into Boston. Now it's called Echo Bridge, and apparently there's a path down on the other side that goes to the bottom, and it does have amazing echoing acoustics. I bring that up because one point I was leading a parent trip and we heard all the kind of and the parents were like, oh my gosh, what is it? And if you were to hear that with kids, they'd be like, oh my gosh, it's coyotes, it's something. Well, it turns out the more we listened in, it was two-legged animals that were making echoing noises down there and trying to make all the noises. Again, I bring it up because any number of things can happen when you're on a trip with children, and it's just helping them manage the unexpected. All right, we're gonna head up and around. We are gonna head up this way, but we'll come back around this way. Again, in the fall with leaves and wet leaves, things are a lot slicker than would normally be. So either path is fine, but I'm gonna take you on both because I want you just to see both routes to where we're going.
What's that? Is that pollution?
Oh, the foam. Actually, that's all natural.
Oh, okay.
There's some falls right on the other side of that bend there. And especially in the fall, with all the natural debris that's in there, the foam gets caused when you get water churning up biological matter, it will create that foam. So as much as it looks like pollution, that is all natural. It's natural, which is good news.
Good, yes.
It is good. And sometimes it appears really brown and horrible looking, but it is just churned up biological matter will cause the foam. The other thing I'll point out, we can't see it from here, but if you were to look up Route 9, you'd see the Welcome to Newton sign. So we are now in Wellesley, and we can now claim this site as a site in Wellesley. All right, we're going to come down this way. Again, there was poison ivy just off the dirt path, so stay on the dirt path, please. Now, at St. Mary's, remember we saw those pieces of rock that looked like that they were embedded in that lava. Here, we're also seeing pieces of rock. How does this look different than the St. Mary's? Ragged?
Probably underneath the other.
Can you say, what do you mean by that? Speak more?
The St. Mary, you look at the top.
Okay.
It's like we from the same rock from the top.
Underneath, interesting. Do these rocks look like they're part of the rock, or do they look more like they're just in the rock? In it. I mean, so if you look, as you look around, you can see places where you can see rounded spots where rocks have fallen out. This rock is called Roxbury pudding stone. It's named Roxbury because it was first identified in Roxbury, Massachusetts. Pudding stone because these rounded rocks inside it reminded the people of raisins in pudding. So they called it Roxbury pudding stone. The pudding stone, this is a sedimentary rock, and this Roxbury pudding stone, the geologists estimate to be about 580 million years old. So this rock, the Roxbury pudding stone, is 580 million years old. But I want us to stop and think for a moment about what it would have taken for this rock to form. Because indeed, these are, the pieces that are in there, are they jagged like that one piece I had, or are they rounded? For the most part. The rocks inside. Around. Okay. So we've already talked about the fact for rocks to become that rounded, they likely had to have been tumbled around in the water. So I want to think for a moment how this rock formed. At some point, hundreds of millions of years ago, all rock, the very first rock would have been igneous rock, the rock that forms from that melted material that slowly cooled. Rock gets exposed at the surface, breaks apart, the pieces get caught in water, get tumbled around in water and smooth. Now all that rock debris that's washing away, those big heavy water bodies of water and the streams are flowing along, and when they hit a large body of water, that flowing water starts to slow down. The very first thing that's going to start as it slows, it can't carry the same stuff it was carrying before. So the very first stuff to settle out will be large rocks, or some of these bigger pieces like this. Then the water keeps kind of flowing into an ocean or whatever, and smaller pieces start settling out. And then sand starts settling out, and then maybe silt starts settling out. That keeps happening year after year after year after thousands of years, and the material starts to build up. Eventually, there is so much rock material built up, and the weight of all that water on top, it all gets compressed into solid rock. Now, a lot of people think of sedimentary rock, they tend to think of things like the Grand Canyon and the red sandstone. Well, that's that sandy stone. Well, that's the same thing, though, that's happened here, only with much larger pieces. So I want us to stop and think for a moment, though. If this Roxbury pudding stone is 580 million years old, give or take a year or two, think how much older these rounded pieces in it would have to be. Because these things would have had to cool, get exposed to the surface, get broken off, get tumbled around in water, carried out to some other place where they settled, got buried under layer after layer after layer after layer to the point that they're compressed enough to form solid rock. And that new solid rock that's formed is 580 million years old. So consider how much older all these rounded pieces have to be. But then this gets us to our third concept that we haven't really talked about. I've talked about weathering, the processes that wear down and break down rock. I've talked about erosion, those processes that carry things away. Our third step, deposition. When the rock material gets left, or the earth material gets left someplace else. So this rock, its whole formation is a lesson in weathering, erosion, and deposition. Because these rounded rocks had to have gotten broken off, swept along and eroded away and carried on in flowing water, deposited, and then formed solid rock. So, pretty cool rock. But that's not the only really cool thing about this rock. Now, first off, if it had all got in layers, we'd expect layers to be flat. What do you notice about this rock? It's angled. So more things have been happening. Here's the other really cool fun fact to know and tell about our Roxbury pudding stone. This exact same Roxbury pudding stone exists in Africa. And I saw the reaction like, how can this be? And this gets us into the story of Pangaea. You may or may not remember. Does anyone remember the term Pangaea?
We're all
one big supercontinent. Around 200 million years ago. So again, we're talking this rock formed 580 million years ago. The continents have always been moving and are still moving. The Atlantic Ocean is actually getting bigger because there's a rift in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that is separating, and new material comes in to fill, new molten material fills it in. But as it separates, there's only so much surface area to the Earth. So as it moves away, those plates are moving someplace else. That's a lot of the reason why we end up having so much volcanic activity and earthquakes all around the Pacific Rim. Because as the Atlantic gets bigger, the Pacific's going to have to get smaller somehow. All right. So, fast reverse back 200 million years ago, and there was the Earth, all the continents moved together to form a kind of supercontinent called Pangaea. Now, if you look, this is in the back of the packet with the geologic background information. It's maybe harder to see in black and white, but as you look in this part I've circled here, the northeastern part of Africa northwestern part of Africa fits really nicely against the boundaries of the northeastern part of North America. So geologists figure that the continents came together, they came apart, they came together again, and then in the last split, when they started moving apart again and moving to their current locations, part of Africa remained hitched to North America. And that's where we are right now. This rock actually would have formed in what we now think of as Africa. But when the continents split, part of that African plate ended up stuck to the North American plate. So of course it wasn't called North American at the time, but what's now the North American plate. And when they moved apart, it remained attached. The line of where it was the Africa and North American plate does run through Massachusetts. I'm not sure exactly where that is, and the science geek in me wants to go there. There's a piece of me that kind of wants to go, I'm in Africa, I'm in North America, I'm in Africa. But, that's just the geek in me. But so this rock, cool for a lot of reasons. Because it's proof of the whole theory of continental drift and how the continents came apart and together. It's evidence of weathering, erosion, and deposition just in the way it's formed. Are there any other signs that weathering, erosion, or deposition has happened here? We've got a big hole here. That's a great way to put it. Yes. So clearly something has happened here to move the rock material out. Again, erosion is one of those ones. We can see erosion, like after a heavy rainstorm, you can see sand and debris that's been swept aside. You can see beach erosion. You can see that kind of erosion more. When we talk about on the geologic scale, a lot of it has to be inference by what we don't see. Clearly, there was rock material here at one point in time, and now there's not. So it has been carried away. That make sense?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
You say this exists in Africa. I mean, scientists, they know from how old the rock that's exactly the same one. They can tell.
I wonder, how do you know it's,
Yeah, because they
Something
can
it looks like.
they look at the composition of the rock and the chemical composition and all the things.
tell.
They can tell.
Definitively.
Now another kind of fun thing to note, if you look at that stone wall over there, the gate, at one point in time, this was an ice pond. And Wellesley was a huge supplier of ice, not only in this area, but from what I've heard, they actually would ship ice off to other parts of the world where they can't get ice because it's not cold enough. So if you notice, there was a stone building by that parking area that used to be the ice house. And that this was an ice pond at one point in time. There's another pond in Wellesley, I can't remember which one, that was also another ice pond. But apparently at one point in time, Wellesley was a huge source of ice. Who knew? Who knew? Leaves a 3, leave a B. But this is completely covered in lichen.
Oh yes, I see it.
Yeah, get it closer, you can see it. Now you also notice, I mean, how do you interpret these stripes going down in it?
A machine.
A machine, yeah, probably, yes. Most likely when they were actually trying to build this aqueduct, they had to blast it out. But I kept watching the progress as they were doing the construction on Route 9. They were blasting through pudding stone. to try and get here. And so they would have had to either drill boreholes for the dynamite, or you might see things like that from core sampling. Sometimes you'll see it in big rocks, like if you go to breakwaters on the shore, you'll see holes in rocks that have been drilled into the holes. But in those cases, oftentimes they've been drilled in just so the machinery can grab the rock and move it. So that's clearly, you can see those kind of things you can pretty well tell are man-made.